Welcome to the Wish I'd Known Then podcast, where we focus on how authors found success, looking at strategies that have taken them to the top of the bestseller charts, as well as what they've learned from their mistakes. Because being an indie author is more than knowing the latest marketing trend. It's about being innovative and creative and learning from your mistakes.
Welcome to the Wish I'd Known Then podcast. I'm Sarah Rosette.
And I'm Jamie Albright. And this week on the show, we have
John Gaspard.
Yes, we do. He's a listener, another listener that we've gotten on the podcast, and it was so good. He writes the Eli Marks mystery series. He has another mystery series as well. But he used to do independent films. And so he's got a book kind of about that and how you can apply those principles to writing. It was really good.
It was really good. We talked a lot of craft in this one, actually.
Yeah, we did.
We do talk, our normal questions, and then we talk about ways that you can apply things that movies do to your books and your writing. So it was very interesting. And he also does a podcast.
Yeah.
So we talked about that and how he's podcasting for readers, and he's using content he already has with a little extra, which is so smart. So really enjoyed it. So that's coming up. And so we should do subscribers first.
Oh yeah, let's do subscribers.
Yeah. So we had a couple of new subscribers this week.
Thank y'all.
Yes, we're so excited to have y'all on board. We have Kristen Bird, and she picked the musical note.
And we have Polly Burseth, and she picked the cat. And then Melissa Ellen, she picked the scales. Hey, Melissa. And Melissa's an old friend. Pretty much since I started writing. I think we met each other that first year. So
that's nice.
That's awesome. Thank y'all so much. We appreciate it.
Yeah. And if you want to subscribe, become a supporter, you can go to wishidknownforwriters.com/support. And we had our online chat, and that's in the feed. Like if you sign up to be a supporter, if you haven't gotten a link for your own private RSS feed, you can contact Buzzsprout, and they will get that to you. So like if you're a supporter, you should have a way to listen to those episodes that are locked. If you don't, let us know and we can help you out. We can get you the email.
Yeah.
So what's
going
going
on? Oh, well, I'll go
you
first.
Go first.
This week's been better than last week. Y'all, bless your hearts. You are and I mean that in a sweet way. Y'all are the best. I mean, just the best. I have had so many people reach out to me after listening to last week's episode. I think they were worried about me and just encourage me. And it was just great. And what's interesting is it's not just women, men and women have reached out to encourage me and to be so kind. And I just, that's the one thing I think that I will take away from this entire horrible experience is the kindness of people. And anyway, I really appreciate it. But this week I am better. And I heard a doctor say that she's a doctor of like the nervous system. And she was saying, if you're experiencing really strong emotions or going through a period of experiencing really strong emotions, her mother had just died. Then you, and you're not moving your body, then you're going to have problems because your body interprets those strong emotions and the feelings and everything as a fight or flight kind of response. And you're not flighting.
You're not doing anything.
You're not doing anything. And so because of that, it increases your stress hormones, which then just perpetuate the cycle. So I've been walking and I do feel better. So that's good. But even like she just said that, like shaking your arms and legs and, for about a minute will be enough to really kind of get you to the next emotional place. Break up.
That's good.
Thank you.
That's good.
So that was good. Other than that, not really doing much. I got some tape-in extensions. I was just showing, and I put them in today.
And they look fabulous.
No longer be Yes, I will no longer be writing. I will now just wear my extensions and flip my hair in public. That is all I will do.
Maybe making a TikTok video with a hair flip.
Yeah. I will be doing that when we get off the video. Get off this call. So
that's good.
Yeah, that's what I'm doing. How about you?
Good. Well, this week has been just crazy at our house, and it's actually worked out really well because I got my book off to the editor. And so I'm doing all those things that are on my list. And one of them was to work on the Shopify store or figure out what I was going to do. If I was going to do ThriveCart or whatever. And so I've just basically built the store while we've had people working outside and inside. And it's been, and we've got the kids in, it's just kind of crazy. So I'm glad I'm not trying to do any like real thinking work, like working on a book. So, but the Shopify store is going pretty good. I mean, I'm close to being done with it, I guess. I feel like it's one of those things that it could go on forever, but I think I'm going to do like the minimum viable store and just get something out there and see how it goes before I invest more time.
You can add to it.
Or I can change things around if I don't like it. So I've been doing that. And then since this podcast, we talk a little bit about writing and craft and learning from movies and TV and stuff. I have a theory I want to test out on you. All right. So it's a Ted Lasso theory. Are you all caught up on that?
I'm not. Okay, I'm not caught up.
Okay. So this is more general. It's nothing specific. So, so one of the things I keep seeing over and over and over is people talking online about how much they are enjoying the Jamie Tart and Roy Kent romance and like they're being together and especially Jamie's arc. And today I thought it's so funny that everybody is so happy for Jamie Tart that he's like turned things around. But Nate kind of has a similar arc, except we see Nate, see him in the beginning when he's fairly nice. I mean, he has some moments where he's not so nice, but we see him go from nice to mean, like his arc kind of goes down. Whereas with Jamie's, we start with him being really mean and we see him begin to change. And I'm thinking that the reason we're all behind him is we got to see him start from. Do you think that's true or not?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
So maybe like when we're crafting characters and when we want to bring them in and where we want to start their arc, that could be a way we could use that in our writing.
Right. And we also saw him being like a low moment, where he kind of realized that, the thing with his dad, that was his save the cat moment. Like you kind of understand why he's the way he is. And if you don't put that in your story, if we don't know why your villain or your whoever is your main character, your protagonist, we don't know why they are the way they are, then it's hard for us to root for them and be on board with them. But as we talk about in this episode, we don't want 30 pages of exposition of why they are the way they are.
We don't need from childhood all the way through. We don't need the 15, 20 plus years of history or even 10, 12 hours. Sometimes that's too much. So.
Right. I am listening to The Story Genius and it's very good. And it's about just how to tell a really good story. And it's been really good. So, I feel like if I'm not writing, I can at least be learning something. So that was good. Yeah. It's good.
Whatever I think like his book about the popcorn principles and all that, I think that everything we're watching and taking in, I mean, I can't help but analyze the story structure and stuff. Like, even if I'm not really that focused on doing that, I think I do that subconsciously. It's really hard to turn that off and just enjoy something without going, it is. Why do I like this character so much? Why do I hate him?
Right. And why have I liked the episodes up to this one and this one I don't
and this one I can't stand.
I've been watching Miss Marple. And so, yes, I have. And I just keep watching them. And I'm like, why am I watching these old shows? But I just can't stop watching them. So, I've been doing the same thing. Yeah. It's hard.
There's something about Miss Marple that's very comforting. Yeah.
Yes, there is. And she has beautiful, powdery, soft skin. I love that. I just want to rub her cheeks. Anyway, we should get on with the interview. We have gone on long enough.
Yes, we have. All right. Well, here is John. Today we have John Gaspard with us. Hi, John. How are you?
I'm good. How are you two doing?
We're great. We're so glad you're here. We have some interesting things to talk about today.
Well, it's fun being here, being a long-time listener and a first-time caller.
Oh, thank you so much. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, here, let me read your bio and then we'll get started.
Okay.
John is the author of the Eli Marks Mystery Series and the Como Lake Players Mystery Series, as well as several books on filmmaking. His latest book is The Popcorn Principles, a novelist's guide to learning from the movies.
I love that. And very interested in that. So let's get into it. Yeah, let's get into it. How did you get into writing, John?
Well, I've been writing forever, really. I made my living for 40 some years in the corporate world, writing video scripts and proposals and speeches and treatments. So I am not unfamiliar with the blank page and having to put something on the blank page. So I'm not, it isn't really a superpower, but it's something that I know a lot of other people struggle with. I'm not afraid of the blank page because I know eventually I will fill it up. So that's not a problem. I've also, since about age 13, been making movies, shorter ones when I was younger. I made a couple feature-length ones when I was in high school and college, and have made several low-budget features since then. So that was sort of my hobby while I was in the corporate world, and then I transitioned out of that into writing novels just because it's easier. I don't have to organize as many people. I don't have to carry as much gear. It was something I was always planning on doing when I got older, and it just seemed to work out. That was the right time to do it.
That's great. That's what a interesting journey. And I love that you went from something that required a lot of people and a lot of equipment to something you could do with just a couple of people, your editors and whatever.
And we can talk about this more later, but there is a real similarity between making low-budget independent movies and trying to get them out there and writing and publishing books. The paths are really, really similar. So I had that as an advantage when I started writing books because I already knew rejection and I knew what it took to be involved in a really long-term process. If you're making a feature-length movie, just like if you're writing a novel, it doesn't happen overnight. It can be a year or two of work. So that was really helpful for me getting into writing, to know that, it takes a while and just hang in there.
Yeah. I was in junior high, so I understand rejection as well. Several of the boys there that I chased down.
Well, they're kicking themselves now.
That's funny. Well, what is your definition of success?
Oh boy, having listened to the podcast and heard everybody's answer, I think everybody's answer is different, and I think their answer changes over the course of what you're doing. When I was making movies, the definition was getting it done and getting in front of an audience. And that's kind of the same thing with books. I'm retired now. I don't have to make money writing. I know there's a whole subset of listeners out there who they make their living writing. I don't do that. I'm just trying not to lose money writing. And so it's a different mindset. So for me, success is just being able to write what I want, when I want, and put it out when I want.
That's awesome. I think that's fantastic because we do get focused on making this a career, and you don't have to do that, and there's nothing, one way of doing things isn't better than the other, and I totally understand.
It's different for everybody, and it changes for. I mean, there might be a point where all of a sudden I feel a need to. The books really have to sell, and I might go into that mode. But right now, I'm in the mode of sell a few books every day, get some lovely emails from happy readers who love the books and keep saying, write more, write more. That's enough. That's good.
It sounds like that Joanna Penn's and Leslie Lefebvre's book, The Relaxed Writer.
I talked to Mark after he put out that book, and he said, "Oh, we should have interviewed you." Sorry about that.
Yeah,
sorry about that.
Yeah.
Well, sorry, I was writing down something you had said that I want to come back to later. Okay. So I'm behind. What do you wish you'd known about writing and craft, John?
The biggest thing, I started doing this around, I guess, 2010, 2012, somewhere in there. And I was of the mindset that my job was to write a novel and then spend 2 years trying to get an agent and a publisher. I guess I had to do that then. the self-publishing wasn't really entirely up to speed then. I mean, if I'd been a little more savvy, it probably would have been. But I didn't know that much about it. And I spent way too much time trying to get an agent. And I dated a couple nice agents over the years, and they spent way too much time trying to sell my first couple books. And it's I guess I needed to go through that and work on other books while they were trying to sell stuff. But it would have been if I knew now what I didn't know then, I would have launched right into self-publishing and just dealt with it that way.
Yeah. But you have to, I think if you come in with the mind, if you've grown up with that mindset or, I mean, for such a long time, traditional publishing was the only way, then you kind of have to go through that to be able to transition to indie, I think. Yes. But for me, I came in just knowing indie. I didn't really want to, just because I had heard other people's experience. And so, I think, but it's hard. It's hard.
It is, particularly when there are publishers who will say, we will get back to you in 1 year, 1 year. And all I can think is, how badly run is your organization?
Yes.
That you can't deal with the thing you're trying to do. Your key thing is bring in new writers and publish them. You're trying to continually keep your coffers full of stuff, and you can't handle that very basic thing.
Right.
It makes me, and as we've learned more and more, particularly with the Penguin lawsuit case and all that Joanna has talked about, they don't know any more than we do. They don't know what's going to be a hit and what isn't. And so, like I say, I had to go through it. I wished I hadn't, because I would have gotten more done.
Yeah. That whole year thing, or, you can query and, it can take years. I didn't start writing till I was 50. I'm like, people, I don't have time. Like, we're burning daylight here. We got to.
I'm right with you there.
Yeah.
I'm right with you.
Yeah.
I don't even buy green bananas. I mean, it's not that bad, but I don't want to wait a year.
Right.
And even when I had a publisher, and I found a nice little niche publisher down there in Texas, and they loved the book, and they wanted me to sign a contract for 3 books. And I said no, because I want writing to be fun. And I was, at the time, I was working full time, and I had to fulfill a schedule every day at work. I had to write stuff, and I didn't want my novel writing to be that. I wanted to write it when I wanted to. But because I didn't sign a contract for 3 books, when I finished a book, it would then be a year for it to get out. And now, as a self-publisher, when I finish a book and it's gone through my editing and I've already got I can put it out tomorrow. I don't, because you need to do some thinking on it. But it's just, all the waiting drives me crazy, and I don't think it necessarily makes for a better book.
No. I agree.
I think publishers, they didn't have to go quickly in the past, and so that just wasn't an issue. And now that they can't quite, I don't know that they're that interested in keeping up with indies, but it just wasn't an issue. And so it is a huge decision now. Like, do you want to wait that long? Because as we're waiting, other books are being released, and more, the market's just getting more and more crowded, and you're losing time when you could be finding readers. So it is something to consider. Yeah. Well, what about marketing? What do you wish you'd known about marketing?
Well, one little thing that I never realized, and my publisher never mentioned it, and maybe it isn't that big a deal, but I think when you're starting out, it might be a little bit of a big deal, is don't encourage your friends and family to buy your books. And they think they're helping. And it's so sweet of them to do that. And you don't like throwing up dirty words like algorithm in front of your mother, but but my relatives and friends are never going to buy another book like mine. And if they're the first 20 people who buy the book on Amazon, Amazon's completely confused. They have no idea who to put the book in front of. So that was kind of an eye-opening thing. The other thing that I learned about marketing when I had a publisher, because I had a publisher for the first 4 books in the Eli Marks series, and then I bought them back because it wasn't going well with them, is that I had no idea how much they wanted me to do until they got mad at me and said they weren't selling. And I said, okay, I'm happy to do that. I'm happy to take Mark Dawson's class and learn all that stuff, but I'm going to need to know what's happening every day. I need to know. And they said, "Oh, that's not physically possible."
No,
and
we can't do that. We're a multi-million-dollar company.
I was laughing before you even finished that sentence.
They're not multi-million-dollar.
No.
But they're a little boutique. And granted, they may have 50 books out there. But the idea that I'm responsible for marketing, fine, I'm okay with that. That's fine. I understand the bargain I made here. But for you not to be able to give me the information that I need to effectively market, it's like, well, that's ridiculous. And I know for a fact that you can assign me, particularly with Amazon, I can be on Amazon ads with you, and I can see what's selling, and I won't screw with your account. I can be a visitor there. Anyway, that was really eye-opening, and that's one of the reasons that that I moved to self-publishing, because I realized the books could do a lot better than they were doing, and they have done a lot better than they did. But I couldn't possibly begin to market them unless I was in charge of it.
Yeah. When you're in control, you can do so much. And a lot of people don't want that control. They would rather hand that off. But then once you hand it off and you see it just being kind of languishing, it's really hard. And if you can get it back. Did you have to go through a long process to get your books back? I don't know if you want to talk about that.
I can. It was one of those things where I could tell by the numbers that I was getting quarterly that nothing of significance was happening. And I also sort of got the sense that I wasn't the only one having problems with them. And I knew that I just, and I've been back and forth with other authors who had the same publisher. We have a little support group. And I was willing to just write a check, because I knew that if I could hand them money right now, that we're not going to fight about it. I'm not going to go to court. I'm not going to tear apart the contract. I'm just going to say, hey, if I write you this check right now, can I have everything back? You bet. And the check cleared, and the next day, everything was gone offline. And I put new covers on everything, and 2 weeks later, everything was back up and running. So, and I had just figured, I'd looked at what the numbers were and said, this is how much you guys will maybe make if you're really lucky over the next 2 years with these books. You're not going to get any more books from me. I'm not under contract, and I will publish the rest of them by myself. But you're not going to get anything else. And I just hit them at the right time with the right check, and the rest is history. But it's hard to go, well, these are my books. Why do I have to pay you to get my books back? It doesn't seem fair. Well, yeah.
That's the contract, though. You're kind of stuck.
That's the one you signed. Yeah. Well, I love that. This is why I love podcasts, because the whole thing about your relatives buying your books and stuff, I learned that from other authors, listening to other authors on podcasts. And it was a revelation. When I heard it, I was like, oh, that's why that first book that I put out under a different name didn't go anywhere, because we just had friends and family buying it, and it screwed everything up. And so, plus we had no idea about marketing, but yeah, you learn those little nuggets of truth on podcasts for free. For free. And I love that. Love that.
And yours is not the only one that I listen to, but there's just about every podcast I listen to on this topic, there's going to be one or two nuggets that you get every time. And you may have to, I'm going to listen to a romance author talk for an hour. Why would I do that? Because at the 45-minute mark, she says something like, oh, yes, what's my version of that? What can I do that makes that work for me? So podcasts are fantastic.
I know. Yeah. I love them. So what assumptions did you make at the beginning of your writing career, and looking back, did they turn out to be right or wrong?
Well, the big one I mentioned was that I had to have an agent and I had to have a publisher. I didn't. However, both agents that I had, the first one was very nice and worked very hard, and then went off to have a baby and decided not to be in publishing anymore. And the second one died. But she was also just so, you got to meet a couple really nice people who really liked what I was doing and went out of their way to. So that was great, even though it didn't work out. I had an assumption that I think we all have, that I was disabused of very quickly, but it's, I think when you're beginning, there's a tendency to think oh, my book's for everybody. No, anybody would like my book.
Yeah.
And of course they wouldn't. And the flip side of that for me was, once I figured that out, when I had this publisher and she saw the first book, and the Eli Marks series is about it's a cozy comedy mystery series about a magician in Minneapolis who does regular magician stuff like trade shows and birthday parties and things, but he keeps stumbling into crimes.
As one does, right?
As one does. And the publisher said, well, this is great because we have a built-in audience of magicians. And I said, I don't think percentage-wise there's going to be any more magicians interested in reading a mystery about magicians than there are in the general population of people interested in reading mysteries about magicians. Just because you are a magician doesn't mean you want to read a book about magicians. And I knew that going in, just because at that point, although I'm not a magician, I'd known a number of them, and I knew their personalities were different enough that you can't just say, oh, this is a perfect book for magicians, because it's not. And that's an assumption where you think, well, my book is perfect for this group, and it might be perfect for a subset of that group, and it might be a great place to start, but it isn't necessarily so.
It's a very narrow niche. And
but if you find that niche, it can be a deep trough if you find it. Yeah.
Yeah. I think that happens a lot in cozies, especially over the last few years. Like, there's all these like hobbies. And I think the publishers thought, oh, if we can market to people who like knitting, or people who like, I don't know,
cats,
different cat libraries and things like that. There's like books and stuff, and it does work to a point, but you can end up in a place where you're just like, don't like your pool of potential readers is so small that it's not gonna do you any good.
No, but I'm happy having a small niche that really love it. There was a off-Broadway show called Title of Show, and it was a show about creating a show. And they had a song in it. I don't know if this was the name of the song or just a line from it, but the line was something like, I'd rather be 9 people's favorite thing than 100 people's 9th favorite thing. And I really enjoy having people who are Eli Marks is their favorite book series. And I prefer that over someone who, well, it's number 10 or 12 on my list. And if a new one comes out, I might buy it. It's more fun having readers who are that interested.
Yeah, that's very true.
If you can find them.
Yeah, you can find them. Yeah.
Gotta get there. Yep. Well, what's the most important lesson you've learned?
Oh boy. I think it's got to be write what you want. The book that you write that is personal to you is probably going to be more popular than the book you write where you try to please everybody. Somebody once asked me, who's the market for your book? And I said, the perfect market is people named John who are me, because I'm writing it for me. I'm writing it for me 20 years from now when I forgot what I wrote. And I sit down to read it, and I will laugh because of all the silly things that I put in there that make me laugh, and they make me laugh now. And I think that's the most important lesson is write for yourself, write what you want, write what you like. And if you're passionate about it and you're able to find your audience, they will love it as well.
Yeah, that's a great answer. What's the biggest change you've had to make in your thinking over the years?
Boy, that's a tough one. It really was that shift from I'm going to work with a publisher and we're going to have a successful series, because that's the way I was raised. That's what you did. That's what everybody did. And if you didn't do that, there was something wrong. And you were a vanity writer, vanity publishing. And it's just not true. And it's so much less true now. People, when I remember when I was a teenager and a friend of my parents had written a memoir, and it was exactly that sort of vanity publishing thing where they, found somebody and they paid them to do it, and it was never considered to be a real book. They'd written this thing that wasn't a real book, when in fact, it is a real book. You sat down and you wrote it. It's a real book. And I'm glad that we're getting over that idea. That, I know when the first book was published, for the Island Mark series. And I went to a local bookstore, a wonderful little crime bookstore here in Minneapolis called Once Upon a Crime. And the owner was at the front desk, and I said, I have this book I'd like you to stock. And he picked up the paperback and he flipped to see where it was published, how it was published. Was it a name he knew? Was it Create Space, which is what was going on at that time? Was it a Create Space book? Because in his mind, that made it not a real book. That's changed, and I don't think if he were still living, he would do that now, because just because you publish it doesn't mean it's a bad book, and just because a publisher published it doesn't mean it's a good book.
Yeah, very true. Yeah, very true. Well, we want to switch gears a little bit and talk about your book called The Popcorn Principles, and tell us a little bit about the title, where it came from, and it's about how writers can take lessons from the movies, right, and apply it to their writing, correct?
Yes. Yeah. Because I have this background making low-budget feature films and am also a novelist, I am often asked to talk on that topic, when I'm at like a book thing, because I have both those camps, and they are very, very similar in many ways. And I'd written a couple filmmaking books in which I interviewed a lot of big time and small time filmmakers about how they went through their process to make movies. Every step of the process, from raising money to pre-production and writing and everything. And I realized that when I'm writing novels, I am using several of the techniques that I learned from them. Now, everything they say didn't cross over, but there were about 25 different ideas that filmmakers were using to make their TV shows and to make their movies that help you when you're writing your novel. It's not going to write the novel for you. It's not the only thing you need, but it does provide some things to look at and go, oh, that would make my book better if I did this. Oh, that would make it better if I did that in it. And so I just codified them into one book. And then at the time I was working on it, obviously you've been listening to Joanna Penn and her AI world. And she said she was talking about ChatGPT. This was just a few months ago. And so I went that day and tried it and just typed in what I was trying to do and said, what would you call this book? And it popped out. I'd call it The Popcorn Principles. And I thought, I never would have thought of that, but that's a very good idea.
Why the heck not? Yeah.
Exactly. So in the book, I just break down, here's 25 different things that filmmakers are doing when they make movies and TV shows that you should think about when you're writing your novel. And I use examples from a bunch of different movies, and then have kind of at the end of each chapter, here's some movies you should watch that'll help you learn those techniques in action.
Yeah. Well, can you give us a couple of examples?
Sure. Yeah, let me think now. There's one called Exploit the Unique. And in filmmaking, particularly if you're making movies outside of Los Angeles, one thing you tell filmmakers is exploit what's unique in your life, in your neighborhood, in your world. If you have something that nobody else has, that gives you an advantage in what you're making. And one example is a movie called Carnival of Souls, which came out in the 60s, was made by a low-budget filmmaker in Kansas City. He was driving through Utah, I think, and saw this abandoned amusement park that was out kind of in the Salt Lake, and thought that's a great location. And he wrote a movie take place there called Carnival of Souls, which is sort of a classic black and white supernatural horror film. And he exploited what was unique in his world. And that's something that people forget, that you have something unique in your life that you've experienced that no one else has. And if you put that in the book, that's going to help it stand out a little bit more. You have maybe a background in something that no one else can talk about. There was a movie called Suckers, which is about used car salesmen, and it was made by a guy named Roger Nygaard, who's actually, besides being a filmmaker, he's an editor on Curb Your Enthusiasm and did Veep for years. And he had a friend who'd been a used car salesman for a long time and had great stories. And he said, these are great stories. We need to write these down. He wrote them down and not only made it into a movie, but the guy also turned it into a one-man show because he had something unique that he could exploit. And everybody has something. You just need to look at what it might be.
Yeah. And sometimes we're so close to it that we can't figure it out. It's like, that's what I did with my first series. I wrote about a military spouse. And to me, that was the life we were living. But then it finally dawned on me one day that a lot of people kept asking like specifics, like how often do you move? And, does your husband do, 100 push-ups every day and run for 5 miles? And I was like, no, where do you get these stereotypes? TV
From
and
Navy
movies.
SEAL books?
Yeah. Yeah. But you may take it for granted. So maybe look a little closer to your life and see what you can use in your writing. Yeah.
Yeah. The president of our local chapter of Sisters in Crime has made her career as a airplane mechanic. One of the few working out there, a female airplane mechanic. That gives her work a very unique. I'm saying very unique. I'm not supposed to. I'm sure my English teacher would be upset about that. But a particularly unique point of view on creating a character like that and that world. And it's going to ring more true. And nobody else can really tell it that way because nobody else has that experience.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, if somebody wanted to do this, and start applying what they're watching in TV and movies to their writing, do you have any tips for somebody that read your book and then, is there a way that you absorb these things, or is it just that you've done this so long? It's kind of a background knowledge to you.
People know more than they think they know. And the purpose of the book is to sort of remind you of things. For example, there's one principle on the idea of coming in late and leaving early, which is, when do you start a scene and when do you end a scene? And you want to end it right before it should end, and you want to start it right before it should start. The best analogy I heard was from Paul Schrader, who was the screenwriter on the movie Taxi Driver. And he said a scene is like a party. You want to get there as late as you can while it's still up and running, and you want to leave before it dies down. And once you think of that, you will see, particularly if you're watching, it's easy to watch this in TV because TV has to use it more than movies do. That combined with the idea of another principle, which is called cutting the shoe leather, which just means get rid of the things between the end of one scene and the beginning of another. And the example I always like to use is the TV show Columbo, which is available now on mini streamers and is a classic 77-minute or something series of little mini movies. But in that time, when they made TV, they did a lot of, here's Columbo walking from his car to the house. Here's Columbo walking down the street. Here's Columbo. And they were trying to fill 77 minutes is what they were trying to do. If you then compare that to, there's a new show called Poker Face, which is a modern version of that, sort of combined with Run for Your Life or The Fugitive or something. But there is no shoe leather there. They have eliminated that. And that's what mostly today, shoe leather is gone. They are getting rid of all of that. And so, for example, if you look at a TV show like What We Do in the Shadows, if that show, the 30-minute version of that show had been done in the 70s, it would be an hour long because it is just cut so tightly. Now, you don't necessarily need to do that in your novel, but you should look at, what are the parts, as William Faulkner said, what are the parts people are skipping? Just don't write those. And look at it and go, can I get out of this scene a little earlier? Is it going to have more impact if I leave it here as opposed to let it dribble on for a few more sentences? I'm a huge fan of Aaron Sorkin and his writing. And one of the things that he has come back to a couple times is the idea of when you're done writing something, go back and you can probably cut the last sentence off of your scene, or in this case, your chapter or whatever, or maybe even the last 2 sentences. You probably overwrote it just a little tiny bit. And so it just acts as a good reminder to look at that and go, if I'm a new reader, what am I skipping here? Am I skipping this paragraph that's describing how she's getting down the stairs and out the door? I was doing a reading for a contest recently, and there was a short story that I read in which fully a third of it was a young woman getting up getting dressed, getting out of her house, walking down the street, mentioning the names of the neighbors, and then finally getting to her job, where the story started.
Yeah. I was going to say that when I was judging contests, when I was part of RWA, that is the biggest thing. Like they didn't start the story in the right place. It starts way sooner than it should. You can back that all out and start where the action happens or in the middle of the action.
And you may need to write that for yourself, but then you can delete it.
Don't give it to the reader.
It's fine.
Yes. And adjacent to that is the idea of burying the exposition, because what they're doing there is they're trying to tell you all the exposition at the beginning, when in fact your reader doesn't need to know everything. And they're, in the traditional police procedural, where they have arrested somebody and they cut, and they're right in the middle of the big interview with them, and they have cut in late into the interview. They've been there a while, and the reason we know they've been there a while is the police person says, "Okay, Louis, tell me one more time what happened when you walk into the liquor store," and then you get that exposition. Now there are more better ways of doing that. I recently started watching a British series called Happy Valley.
Yes, I've watched it. Yeah.
And in the very first episode, when we meet the character played by Sarah Lancashire, there is a guy in the middle of a park, and he's drenching himself with kerosene or something. He's going to light himself on fire. And she has come as a police officer to stop him. And he's ranting, and she's ranting right back at him. And as part of yelling at him, she says, "Look, I'm 50-something years old. I've been doing this for years. I'm divorced. I have one dead daughter and a son who doesn't talk to you. My sister's a former heroin addict. That's my life. What's yours?" And it, as I'm saying it now, you go, well, that's just exposition. But it wasn't exposition when she did it.
It was part of the story.
It was buried in. Another great example is in the movie Tootsie. Very early on in the movie Tootsie, Dustin Hoffman goes to yell at his agent, played by Sidney Pollack, to say, "Why didn't you put me up for this part? This other guy got this part, and why didn't you put me up for it?" And in the course of a 3-minute scene in which they argue with each other, and which is a very funny scene, written by Elaine May, probably. Larry Gelbart had something to do with it, but I think it feels more like Elaine May. In the course of that argument, we'd learn that he is an excellent actor, that he's very well regarded, but that no one will work with him because he's too difficult to work with, that he needs to raise money because he wants to put on a play that his roommate has written. All that information is painlessly given to you because it's in a very funny argument. So that's just, one of the tricks of how am I telling people stuff? Is there a more elegant way that I can get this information across without saying, "Okay, Louis, tell me one more time, how did you get into the liquor store?"
Yeah. Taking it up just a level, the way you deliver it. I'm sorry, Jamie, go ahead.
Oh, no, it's fine. It's harder to do that. Yeah. It's easier to write the exposition and deliver. But I also think it insults the reader, especially like if you're reading a mystery or you're reading a thriller or something like that. I mean, even in romance, it's the same way, but I think it's less offensive to the reader.
Yeah.
But when you're reading like something that you have to figure out, and they're just kind of hand feeding you stuff that really doesn't seem important because it's going to be important later, it's offensive because as a reader, you're like, let me figure this out. This is why I'm reading this book.
It's a little easier for me with Eli Marks because he's first person, and you can't get away with that in first person as easily as you can if you have someone narrating your way through the story.
Yeah.
And so I haven't had to deal with it as much, but you still have to get information across in an elegant way so they don't know that you're telling them stuff.
Right.
Particularly if you're putting in red herrings that are going to pop up later, or trying to hide a clue. The best way to hide a clue is in a joke. And they're going to laugh. And then later on, remember, oh, he did mention that. Yes.
Yeah. But everyone thought he was joking or too busy laughing to remember it. Yeah.
In fact, that's not just clues, but any exposition, if you can bury it in humor, they're not even going to know.
Very good. Well, you are a podcaster as well. And we want to talk about your podcast because it's for readers. tell us how you do it and why and the results, and tell us the name too.
It's called Behind the Page, the Eli Marks podcast.
Oh,
and
okay.
It came about because I was trying to, I'm in charge of my own marketing, as it turns out. And I was trying to think, what can I do with existing assets that will get readers in? And I have been very fortunate in that I have a good friend who is a professional narrator and who said early on, let's make audiobooks. And so he's recorded all 8 of them, and he's very, very good. And people love listening to the way he does it. So I thought, okay, I have 8 audiobooks. And I'd listened at that point to tons of podcasts. So I knew what I liked and I knew what I didn't like. And I thought, okay, let's do this. We're going to do a podcast. And the first year it came out every 2 weeks. So there's 24 of them a year. There's 24 chapters in the first Eli Marks book, which is called The Ambitious Card. So each episode, you'll get to hear one chapter from the book. And that's easy because it's already recorded. I don't need to do anything. It's all set to go. So that's 1/3 of the episode done even before I've started. But I thought that isn't going to really be, it would be enough. That's fine. You're just giving away the audiobook and making them wait. But I think we can do more than that because my book is about a magician and I know a lot of magicians and the magicians I don't know, for the most part, I can get to and I can talk to. I can converse via email with Teller of Penn and Teller. I can't get him on the podcast, but he will answer emails. I can't get David Copperfield, but I can get the next level down because they're all very approachable. So the idea was each episode, we will have one chapter of the book. If there's something in that chapter that I could talk about specifically, I'll get someone to talk about that. For example, in one of the early chapters in the book, Eli meets with his uncle and his uncle's cronies, all of his other magician friends who are all in their 70s. And I knew that the talk show host, Dick Cavett, was a magician when he started out and was a huge fan of magic. And he had a lot of magicians on his show in the 60s and 70s. And I reached out to him and he came on for 2 episodes. And so I had Dick Cavett talking about old magicians, which made perfect sense. There was a chapter that had a mentalist in it who ends up dying. But that whole chapter is about his mentalism act. So I reached out to Kreskin, and Kreskin came on and talked about that. So it went that way for the first 2 years, where if there was something I could tie into in the chapter, I would, certainly in the first year. The second year, for the second book, which is called The Bullet Catch, in that book, Eli is teaching an actor how to be a magician on screen. And so we did, those 24 episodes were a lot about how to be a better magician. However, in doing a survey recently, well over half the listeners that I have are just mystery lovers. And the other half are mystery lovers who are magicians. So even though they don't specifically care about magic, they are interested in hearing these people talk about the specific portion of their craft that we're talking about. Now, for the third year, I was trying to get some other stuff done. And as you know, putting out a podcast is no small task. Even if 1/3 of it is done for you every episode.
It is time consuming. Yeah.
It is very time consuming. So for this, we're in season 3 right now. And the 8th book in the series consisted of a dozen short stories. So we're doing just 1 episode a month, but they're longer episodes, longer interviews, and then a full short story every month. And it's been fun. I've talked to some amazing men and women in the magic or even in the entertainment community. I just had a lovely chat that will come out soon with a ventriloquist named Jay Johnson, who you might remember from the TV show Soap, as the crazy ventriloquist on that show. And so we don't just talk magic; we talk performance and life in general with these people. And we've figured out a format for season 4, which will be a little tiny bit different. And it looks like we'll continue until I'm done with books. So we'd have 8 full seasons, or maybe 9, depending how far I get on the next book.
Well, that is wonderful. I love how you're used existing content, because that's something that we've talked about, that we want to do more things for our readers. But
somebody said, you're giving away your audiobook. And I said, I'm not really giving it away, because you have to work. If you just wanted to listen to the audiobook, you'd have to work at it. And the people who are going to buy the audiobook are not those people. But those people, and I found this to be true, get impatient and go, I want to finish the story. I will just go buy the audiobook now.
Yeah.
So they're 3 chapters in and they end up buying the book. And the audiobook sales have skyrocketed since I started doing the podcast. Now I can't prove that that's, what happened.
It's a nice correlation, though.
It's a nice correlation. Yes. Or certainly a nice coincidence, if nothing else.
Yeah. That is. Well,
so
that's just fascinating. I love that.
Have you found new readers, do you think, who found the podcast?
I think we have. I think we have. One of the things that, like I said, I'd listened to a lot of podcasts and knew what I wanted. I wanted to edit like you guys do. Because some podcasts, people just hit record and they just spew for 90 minutes. And I wanted to not waste people's time. So I cut things up quite a bit. And I wanted to make good use of show notes. So each episode show notes have a lot of links to look at clips of these performers or other things that'd be of interest, but they also have links to, hey, do you want to read a free Eli Marks book? Click here. Yeah. Okay, now I've got your email. You want to listen to a free audiobook? Now I got your email. And that's a continuous source of new readers because Audible and Find a Way, they do find a way to recommend it to other people who seem like they'd be interested in it.
Yeah. Right.
And the more of my listeners that rate it and review it, the more, I've had a number of people email me and say, this just popped up as something I should listen to and I love it. Thank you so much. It's like, well, thank you, because I didn't do anything besides make it.
Yeah. And the great thing about podcast is that their shelf life is so long compared to like ads or maybe some other social media or even a blog post. Yeah. If somebody's interested, finds your podcast, they might go back and listen to the whole thing.
Well, if they want to listen to the whole book, they're going to have to. And one of the things I decided early on was I'm a big fan of the Dick Van Dyke Show. Remember the Dick Van Dyke Show?
Oh, gosh, yes.
Which still works almost 100% today, because when Carl Reiner made it, he said, we're not doing anything topical. They very rarely mention anything topical at all. No president, no news, no nothing. And so it's always current. It's black and white, but it's current. And that's what I decided we were going to do. We were going to, we don't do, hey, what's up with you with my co-host, and hey, what's going on in your life?
Right.
When we had interviews during COVID, I cut out anything referencing COVID because I just didn't want to place it in a particular time.
Yeah.
So that 10 years from now, someone, I'm just now working on a new Eli Marks series, because Eli's in his 30s and he's got 8 books. I'm working on a version of it when he's 13 years old and he's just learning about magic. And it's for middle grade students. So they'll read those. By the time they're reading those, they're old enough to start the series, and they will, in theory, go through the whole series. And they can listen to the podcast and listen to the books, and it won't feel like, well, that's 20 years old. That seems old, because we don't have any of those references.
That's great. Yeah. I actually try to do that with my books. I try not to make references like that in my books either, because I want it to be as evergreen as possible. Yep. I think, except for our intro, our content on this podcast, we're really lucky that in 3 years, not a whole lot's changed in the industry. So the things that we've talked about are still the same. And so I think that's one of the reasons people have come in and like binge the whole podcast, because it is evergreen as of right now, it's evergreen, and they can really use the information. Yeah. Even though we recorded it a couple of years ago or something.
Yep. That's the beauty of it.
Yeah. Well, this has been so interesting, and we've just enjoyed, this is just a different way of thinking about marketing. And I think it's been great, and thinking about craft. It's a good look at a different way to think about how we can write our books. So, but we always like to ask, what's the best thing you've done to set yourself up for success?
I think it's that I've created a reasonable definition of success. And I'm not comparing myself to what others do. There's a sequence in the Eli Marks books when he's a youngster and he's a teenager, and he's talking to his Uncle Harry, and his Uncle Harry's a sage old magician. And Eli says, I'm so far behind all these other magicians. I met an 8-year-old kid who knows all this stuff, and I don't know any of it. And Uncle Harry says, that's the human condition. You're always going to have people who are ahead of you. You're always going to have people who are behind you. Yeah. And if your metric is, where am I in relation to them, you're never going to be happy. And so I just try to, do the stuff that I like and be happy with, so that 20 years from now, when I'm reading through it, it still makes me laugh and I don't grimace at something.
That's great. I love that definition. I feel a little attacked, but I love that definition.
This is all personal. It's whatever works for you.
That's great. Well, tell everyone where they can find out about your books, your podcast, all of that.
Sure. The best place for the books, because all the books live at albertsbridgebooks.com. That's albertsbridgebooks.com. And you can find everything there. There's also an Eli Marks site, but it just duplicates what's on Albert's Bridge. And if you want to find the podcast, just go to your favorite podcast app and look for Behind the Page, the Eli Marks podcast. You can listen, as of this recording, to the first 2 books in their entirety. And before the year is done, book number 8 will be up there as well. And then we jump back next season to book number 3.
That's great.
Great.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Well, thank you. It's been great talking to you. And we will have all the notes at wishidknownthen.podcast.com. And thanks to Alexa Larberg for editing and producing the podcast, and to Adriel Wiggins for doing the admin. Yep. See everybody next week.
Bye.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to the Wish I'd Known Then podcast. We hope this episode inspired you, empowered you, and made you laugh a little bit too. If you loved it, tell your friends about it. And if you feel so inclined, leave us a review. We look forward to being with you again next week.